This is the Fifth Estate winning headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you might have missed this morning. But we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 18th of July, 2019, and I am 2J.
I am JM.
And I am DM, your host. Let's take a look at today's headlines. Daily Nation. Duale Link Company in 2.6 billion shilling tender saga. The Standard. Uhuru Ruto Ides clash over leaked letter. And finally, The Star. Kiunjuri in trouble over 1.8 billion shilling maize cash.
Yeah.
Before we tackle each of them, let me say this seems to be a lowest common denominator here.
That is very true.
There's a very well choreographed scheme to dismantle the allies of the deputy president.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Is what I'm seeing.
And therefore, by that logic, these are, we can say that they're sponsored headlines.
Yeah. I think that right now they're trying to manufacture consent to get us to think in a certain point of view. And we're not going to buy it, but I think let's look at the headlines and analyze them.
It's not clever at all. As a political strategy, good strategies are supposed to be transparent, but we can see right through this.
Yeah.
Right.
So, not going to work.
So let's look at the Star. So what we have here, the story is about Kiunjuri and a payment that was made to a company that had supplied maize, I think in the last financial year, worth 1.8 billion shillings.
Yeah.
And the National Cereals and Produce Board is saying that they were bypassed, and so that payment was irregular, is what they're saying. Also, there's a maize shortage.
Yes.
The country as well, because we're having to import, quite a bit.
We're having to import, and there's that whole drama around it.
Yes, and it's Kiunjuri who's telling us that we have to import 6 million
precisely.
bags. Yeah.
For me, I see it as smokescreen.
Yes.
I have it in good authority, actually, that the Ministry of Agriculture historically has been the domain of the Kalenjin community. And here we have a Central Kenya minister who has paid a company of Central Kenya directors, we are told in this story.
So it's a tough war.
So maybe there's some tough wars going on behind the scenes.
Yes.
Yeah. So what we're trying to say is, we're comparing one supposed DP ally with another on
DP
the
ally
headline.
And a clash between their eyes.
But if we look first at the Daily Nation headline, Duale Link Company in 2.6, this is a whole mouthful. There's something very, very wrong with this headline. And as we said yesterday, the Standard editor was asleep. But today he seems to have woken up from his sleep. And then what has happened is that the Daily Nation editor has fallen asleep. So I think he needs to reassess that headline. But I think that is a very funny story. So what's happened is that Duale, in the past 10 years, supposedly has received 2.6 billion worth of government tenders.
Yes. Yeah.
And so they were questioning why him as a public servant had acquired those tenders, because he should not. And so he came out and said that the Duale that owns this company that received those tenders is not this Duale. There are in fact two Aiden Duales. And he provided the ID and passport of this second
Which
Duale.
he happens to be walking around
He
with.
walks around with it in his back pocket, which makes no sense. So he provided this information to the Daily Nation and said, I am not this Aiden Duale, I am another one. So I do not own this company. Of course, it makes no sense. But the point here being, as you've said already, this is a DP ally.
Yeah.
So,
but also, what do you expect? A goat eats where it's tethered, as the African proverb goes.
That's true.
So the Standard is still on drama, with the two men at the executive being at loggerheads with each other through their eyes. So the story is about a letter that was addressed to the Attorney General, and from the letterhead we can see that it's from the office of the President. So what is making State House annoyed about this letter is that it's making the President look like he didn't know what he's doing when he was signing the appropriations bill. The letter is advising the Attorney General to make it a political process in Parliament. This is in reference to the fight between the National Assembly and the Senate about the Division of Revenue bill. But what this story also shows us, it's just a continuation of these two other headlines. These people are at loggerheads and they are working at cross purposes. So we can predict that headlines going forward will be corruption related, but corruption associated with people that are affiliated with either the president or the deputy president.
So what do we say about the headlines? What is our criteria?
The criteria, ladies and gentlemen, are the headlines topical or speculative? Are they repetitive or groundbreaking? And finally, are the headlines thoughtful or
just
plain lazy?
Firstly, we're throwing away this Daily Nation instantly just by virtue of being unreadable.
Why don't we just toss them collectively, because we've already made the judgment that these are manufactured headlines, which just goes against journalistic practice.
Yes, goodbye.
So we'll move on to the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country, and just like the headlines, we have a three-part criteria that we use to break them down for you. We ask ourselves, is the cartoon humorous? Does it make us laugh? Or is it dry as a biscuit? Is it satirical or is it pessimistic? And finally, is it effective or just plain lazy?
Yeah.
We have a mouse there.
I enjoyed this one. This is Ozone.
Of the Star.
Yeah, of the Star. He's drawn Mwangi Kyunjuli. With big ears. He's enjoying this maze, it would appear, and he's saying we have a shortage. Yeah, but the caption also says, I smell a rat.
Kyunjuri himself had told us that he smells a rat, so the rat he was talking about is himself.
That's what Ozone is telling us.
Because he's feasting on some corn, or maize as I have been told, that is named National Strategic Food Reserve.
Precisely, so he's eating into that.
I say let's put in the parking bay while we look at
the others.
Yes,
great.
Here.
Right.
What are we looking at next?
Have Aiden Duale. Why don't you describe that one for us?
Here we have
Victor Ndula.
Who has drawn Uhuru Kenyatta, I should say, as he's on the marathon track, racing against Raila Odinga. And all around Uhuru Kenyatta is some vials of steroids, written Cambridge Analytica. And even on his own body, there's syringes injected into him. And so, as a result of the steroids, he has very elongated legs that actually have sprang him from the start to the finish in one step with his shapely legs. And next to him is a struggling Raila.
Raila is perpetually struggling. And this is where I found the humor here. Politically, right? 2013, sleeping through the revolution. Didn't register enough people. 2017, his opponent hires Cambridge Analytica to do psychological warfare. Works against him. Low voter turnout. I mean, can this guy be helped, honestly?
I think this is a fantastic cartoon. I really like it.
I enjoyed it for that purpose.
It's very funny.
Okay, let's put it in
Standard Gado.
Yes. We are looking at a caricature of the CS for Education, Magoha, who has held up Sosion. And he's basically bullying him. And Sosion, the head of KNUT. And here it says, bullying in schools is a bigger problem than we thought.
Because Magoha is actually
he's drawing parallels there, also from bullying in high school, primary school, and so on and so forth.
And the context is that Magoha is forcing the competence-based curriculum down Nat's throat, and Nat has some concerns about it, which Magoha is refusing to accommodate.
But sometimes I think, teachers sometimes can just politicize matters. Then they can do politics for the sake of doing politics.
So Sosion deserves to be roughed up.
He deserves to be roughed up. And Magoha as well is actually, I think, going to accomplish great things at the Ministry of Education. We need a bit. We need a bit more of the bullying in the executive to get things happening.
I think there's a lot to be said of Magoha being drawn as the bully. That the ministry has the ability to wrangle, and strangle the
and
teachers.
So what Jeremy is saying is that they should use that ability in order to move. It's this argument that we always have about democracy against development. If you have a lot of democracy, then we don't move forward.
And also, change is not a simple thing. Nobody likes change.
So by the time we get to this competence-based curriculum, if Magoha doesn't bully people, the children will be 80 years old.
Okay, so right now I see it as between Victor Ndula and Gado. And I'm going to vote for Victor Ndula. I think there's a fantastic cartoon.
I agree with you. I don't vote for it. I like it, but I vote for Gado's cartoon.
I also vote for Gado's
very good depiction, and it's very effective.
I know bullying.
Very effective.
Okay, so Sion.
We
are tossing the Nation and the Star and announcing Gado as the winning cartoon.
And now we'll move on to the final thought segment. What's our final thought today, 2M?
Yes. 2J. I'll try and do my best 2M voice. I will. And now,
force of habits.
And now, our final thought. Today is inspired by a short story entitled "Memories We Lost" by Lidudu Malingana.
Lidudu Malingani.
Malingani, I keep doing it wrong. All right, so before we get to this story, I think I'll just take us back to what we've looked at this week so far. So on Monday, we looked at Discovering Home by Binyavanga Wainaina, the story of a Kenyan who comes back home and tries to rediscover his place back in his homeland. On Tuesday, we looked at Weight of Whispers by Yvonne Owuor, the story of exiled Rwandans who come to Kenya and are trying to flee as asylum seekers and the troubles that they encounter as they try to do that. On Wednesday, we looked at Hitting Budapest by No Violet Bulawayo, that looks at the stark differences between the haves and the have-nots in a post-colonial African setting. Yeah. And today, we're going to look at, as I said, Memories We Lost by Lee
Dudu Balingani.
There we go. And just like the other stories that we've looked at this week, this short story won in 2016 the Kane Prize for African Writing. So this in South Africa. So this story tells the emotional tale of a girl who acts as the protector for her sister, whose serious mental health issues rock her family but also her community at large in a very small remote village in South Africa. Yeah. The story explores a very difficult subject matter, which is specifically the traditional beliefs in a rural community and how those end up making it very hard to tackle the stigma of schizophrenia or mental illness. Yeah. So throughout the book, or rather 3/4 in the book, this illness is described as this thing. Yeah. They do not know what it is. They just refer to it as this thing that takes over the narrator's sister at random intervals. And over time, it robs the sister's ability to speak, to remember, to have emotional connections, and hence why we have the title, Memories We Lost. Yes. There's a quote in the book that says, "Memories faded one after the other until our past was a blur." So for me, this story really shows how love and education come together to empower the narrator to do a good thing for her sister. So as we said, from the outset of the book, we know the illness to be this thing. Yes. But eventually the sister gains this knowledge and calls it schizophrenia. Yes. Whether it is or not schizophrenia, we do not learn.
Yeah, because it's the teacher is the one who says made the declaration, but not being a doctor, we don't know if that's actually the
diagnosis. But just that little bit of knowledge, that enough was enough to tell the narrator to take her sister off her meds. And in doing so, she begins to see her sister again. Yes. They're able to make eye contact. They're able to make fresh memories. They're able to bond again. Yes. And then in the end, the only recourse that these two siblings have is to run away from home because the ill sister is going to be sent off to a witch doctor. Yeah. And so I think that we found maybe 5 key themes.
Yeah. But just before we get into the themes, let me break down schizophrenia for the sake of our viewers as well. Yeah. So schizophrenia, people who have it usually don't have a feeling of control in their body, right? So the feeling, and that feeling of control that you usually get in a state of normalcy is what you call a state of agency, a sense of agency, right? And here's how a sense of agency works. When you want to kick a ball, your motor cortex, which is a part of your brain which coordinates the planning, the control, the execution of your voluntary actions, it sends 2 commands. Yeah. One command goes to the leg, tells the leg to kick the ball. But a second command, which is now a photocopy command, so it's that same command also now is sent to another part of your brain.
And so it's giving the rest of your body a memo that we are now about to kick this ball.
Absolutely. We are now about to kick the ball, and these are the sensations that you'll experience.
So the body doesn't get surprised.
When you kick the ball. Precisely. So that the body doesn't get surprised. Now, people who are schizophrenic don't have that second command element, right? So it's like the memo hasn't been sent, and that's why they feel like they're possessed. Yeah. That's why they feel like they've got
the experience
voices
is not
in
their
their
own.
head. Precisely. Exactly. So that's essentially what schizophrenia is. Right? That disconnect between that part of the brain.
So I think that if we were just to highlight some of the themes that we agreed upon in this short story, we looked at mental health in Africa and the stigma that surrounds it. Yes. The effects of mental health on the person, on your family, on your community, ignorance and superstition, again in an African context, and then lastly, Africa as a schizophrenic continent. You know, how we have these fractured identities because of the baggage we've been left with in a post-colonial situation.
Absolutely. It's like as Africans, and not just in the case of mental illness, generally we have a dual existence. We're straddling 2 spheres. One is ethno-customary, which is informed by our tradition and our Africanness, and the other is the civic sphere, which was now brought by the colonialists, and it manifests itself through our laws, our system of governance, and particularly in this story through religion. the very beginning of this story, we see the protagonist or the narrator telling us that the thing has overcome his sister or her sister, and he or she quickly says two prayers. One prayer is offered to the ancestors, and another prayer is offered to God. And also, as the story progresses, we see that the choice of treatment that the family has taken is always dual. There's always a pastor, but there's always a sangoma, or which doctors or medicine men are called in South Africa. But the other thing that is also related to the duality of our existence is that because we as Africans see mental health as still as a mystery, or traditionally we see it as a mystery, we treat it as something that we are afraid of. And if we are afraid of this thing, then we don't look at it clinically. The person has been possessed. And if the person has been possessed, we therefore rough them up so that this
we deal with it the wrong way.
Demon can come out.
I think that goes to the ignorance and superstition.
Ignorance and superstition of Africans really, really irks me. You know, that stuff that we cannot explain, we say the devil has possessed us. You know, and yet we can look to science instead of looking to sangomas. You know, we can look to science, and after you've exhausted science to tell you are clinically depressed, you have schizophrenia, then you can also look to divine intervention.
Absolutely.
But honestly, in a world where we have deciphered so many things of modern medicine, we really should be able to
and not just modern. Maybe we can even change our traditional approach, because I think if the community was more nurturing, then maybe we would have made different strides there. And the other thing that happens because of this mystery, or how we look at mental illness, is the retributive way that we deal with it instead of restorative. And the two things came to mind. One is that in the African setting, when a boy or a girl takes their partner to meet the elders will ask one or two or three things. And top three will always be, is there a history of madness in this person's family? We are so afraid of it that we don't want to propagate it in our family tree. And so people who are affiliated to madness are to what? Not be married. The second thing is, there was a headline 2 days ago, I think, about Esther Arunga and her plight in Australia and the death of their child and how the child died. This book gives a description that is eerily similar. The protagonist's sister is said to be taken to a sangoma, a medicine man, who will go and exorcise her by baking her, literally putting her like a pig on a sty on top of a fire. So it's this retributive way that we, and if Esther Arunga was in Kenya, by the way, if she was in front of a Kenyan court, she'd probably
wouldn't have gotten 10 months.
Compared to the 10 months that the Australian courts gave her. And it really shows how maybe Africa and the West deal with these issues of mental health.
Absolutely. So, but those are the two things. The flip side of madness is also genius. And I will give an example of somebody who's schizophrenic but ended up making a miraculous recovery. John Nash. He contributed extensely to mathematics, to game theory. He actually contributed what you call the Nash equilibrium.
The Nash equilibrium,
Now, Nash was diagnosed with schizophrenia at about the age of 30 in 1959. And for about 20 years, went into obscurity, dealing with this thing,
getting treatment
for it. But in the 80s, he ended up making a recovery. He went back to Princeton University, and he eventually in 1994 was awarded the Nobel Prize in Economics for his contributions. So actually, you can end up becoming a really influential genius in the world.
But I think the first step is accepting that there is a way to solve those issues, and stigma is not one of them. And I think that's part of the beauty of some of the books that we've looked at this week, is that we looked at the post-colonial writers a few weeks ago, where their job was to write about what we were left with. The white man left, what has happened now. But these new contemporary writers are able to write about a lot of the taboo and the stigma and the things that we deal with that previously we could not talk about. And I think it's very empowering.
It's very empowering, and it's wonderful because these African writers, oh my gosh, they are amazing. They are the imagery is beautiful, the words are lyrical, but they're also using that literary genius that they have to put to light the things that actually burden us, and also things that we celebrate as Africans. So I think as a parting shot, what we can say is that mental health in Africa should be normalized the way physical health is normalized. And the entity that should provide leadership for this is the government.
Yes.
You see, we have only one public institution in the country for mental health, a mental health institution, Mathare. And usually when you're sent to Mathare, it's not that you're sent to hospital, it's actually like a condemnation. So we need to shift that mindset so that the people who are suffering from mental illness can get the treatment that they deserve. One more thing, I came across a book by a journalist called Richard Hammond called Condemned. Actually, it was an examination of mental illness in Africa, and this guy is a journalist who has covered war-torn areas, who has covered famine and all sorts of horrors of life, but he says he has not seen the indignity on humans, or he has never seen a severe case of suffering as the mentally ill African person. And this suffering, they suffer under their own government, they suffer under their own community, they suffer under their own family. So it's really tragic, and it's about time that we made that flip. So this has been the winning headlines. We did not have a winning headline today. They were all manufactured. And we had a winning cartoon from the Standard, from Gabriel. See you tomorrow. Thanks for joining us. Have a good night.